Well, good morning, everyone. Oh, that's wonderful. We'll call this meeting to order. As soon as I get my screen up here in the right format. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this morning? Now, this is the Planning Council. Just so everyone knows, there's 3 members of council away on holidays. It's a good thing we didn't have a 4th, or we wouldn't have a meeting. So.
Well, one of them is actually watching us today.
Apparently, we're to move this meeting along because his tee off is at noon. So.
Good luck on that.
I have a resolution here to adopt the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that Council adopts the Planning Council agenda of November 12, 2018 as amended, and there was an amendment which everybody should be aware of. Add item 6D, Planning Committee Resolution, PC-07-18. So that will appear on your agenda as the last item before adjournment. And I've also been informed that item 6C, a request to defer, has come in. And is that from you, Jamie, or is that from the owner?
That's from the applicant for the property, and
Okay.
Staff concur that we would like an opportunity to review. There's been a number of comments received yesterday and last night. We'd like to have a chance to review those and comment on those.
Okay, sounds good. So everybody's got that one? So are there any other suggestions for amendment to the agenda? Councillor Cooper?
Yes, a week ago, Thursday, I requested an additional item to be put on the agenda, and it was not. And I am requesting that it be put on the agenda. The item was, it's about Macy Bay, and it's a report that came in from the Ontario Water Resources application regarding water taking at 380 Macy Bay Road, which was submitted to the Ontario Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and its Water Resources Division. The request is to be able to draw water from Georgian Bay because of 380 Macy Bay property. There is insufficient water available from the wells drilled to the underlying aquifer. This need for an additional source of water was revealed by the peer review, the firm Ainley, and the development report for potable water. Therefore, the reason for this resolution is to have the staff make a request for an extension to the Director of Water Resources Division, MOECC, to allow time to review the document, which has taken months to prepare, has just been released, is highly technical, and has over 600 pages in length. So the resolution was, therefore be it resolved that the Council requests staff to contact MOECC Director to request the extension of time for a period of 60 days starting November 23rd until January 23rd. This extension will allow time for the Township of Georgian Bay staff and anybody else that's required to properly review and respond to this application. So my question is, that was turned away. The reason I was given was that there was a resolution passed this summer to not visit any further matters related to Macy Bay. This is new business, and so I suggest we need to discuss this. So I asked the council if if somebody would like to second it first, and then secondly, pass this resolution.
So, Councillor, a number of things. The resolution re-Macy Bay was for them to bring back an application. It didn't say anything about new business coming forward. There's probably a bit of contention to putting anything on the agenda today, so I would have to have a separate amending resolution to the adoption of the agenda. But I do believe staff have some comments which might alleviate the whole issue at this point.
I'd still like to see it discussed.
Laurie or Jamie?
Through your worship, I did have an opportunity to look at the EBR posting related to the permit to take water application from Macy Bay. Had a discussion on Friday with Mike Jones from Azimuth Consulting, who is the hydrogeologist that completed the peer review for the Macy Bay studies that were provided, and just asked him about the permit to take water process and how it unfolds. He said he would be available to provide comments if the municipality wanted him to provide comments in advance of the comment deadline period, which I can't remember if it was November 23rd or November 28th, but it was towards the end of the month. One thing he did indicate was that permit to take water is generally a technical exercise, and he said typically unless there's significant negative technical comments that are received by MOE, it's unlikely that it would have an effect on the issuance of a permit. He did say that permit applications are generally consider from a big picture perspective, the concept of is water being taken from one watershed and put in another watershed, and he said that isn't the case here. Water is being taken from Georgian Bay. It is proposed to be taken from Georgian Bay and eventually, for the most part, be recycled back into that same watershed. So he thought it would be unlikely that the permit to take water would be denied by MOECC, but he is available to provide comments on that. And he did indicate that it's unlikely, in his experience, it's very unlikely that MOECC would extend any commenting period. That's based on his experience. So I did ask him that question. And then just finally, I asked him about the different flows that are identified and why the flow rates identified in the permit to take water are higher than what's identified in the Hydro-G report. He did identify the Hydro-G report has two areas that are flows required. One's required to address the demand created from the 180 units, and the other flow demand is for fire suppression. So those are where the numbers come from the Hydro-G report. And finally, the reason the values are higher in the permit to take water is that he indicated permit to take water applications are based on the pump size and how much per minute or per hour a pump can produce if it's operating at full capacity, which in this case it wouldn't operate at full capacity very often. It would supply water on an on-demand basis. So that's a bit of a summary of the discussion I had with him. But he did indicate again that so I guess the key takeaways are, he indicated it's unlikely that an extension would be granted, although I guess we could ask for it, but he would be available to provide comments on behalf of the municipality if you decided that's the route you want to go. Thanks.
So is he going to provide those during our council meeting, or?
Your worship, there isn't another council meeting available, or there isn't another council meeting scheduled before the commenting deadline period. So if council were to direct them to provide, I guess there's two parts. In accordance with Councillor Cooper's, you could ask that there be an extension granted, but if there weren't an extension granted, you could also subsequently ask that comments be provided. Again, I come back to this notion of them being technical in nature, and that's the hydrogeologist's role, is a technical comment. So I'll leave that up to you folks to make that decision.
Laurie?
Just on the extension, Nick did call the ministry on Thursday or Friday, and they said highly unlikely. And I spoke to Chris Tazikas this morning, and he said unlikely. So I think the idea that there's going to be an extension is probably a non-starter. The question is, would you like us to have the Hydro G submit comments? And I think we can probably do that without a council resolution, if that's your wish.
Okay, so this is our person that
Right.
does the peer reviews and that sort of thing. So does that satisfy you, or you still want, I don't know what else there is to
I'd like
discuss.
to see both things happen, actually. One is the request for an extension, and here the answer no. And the second point that you made, which is a review. So that's what I'd like to see.
So I guess we probably need an amendment to the agenda to, so,
It's already there. Somebody else needs to second it, if they don't, then
well, you have 3 people that you can ask.
would you like to second it?
Let's get on the agenda. But should this go on the council agenda? This is not a planning issue, is it?
It's just a planning.
Is it? No.
So moved by Peter Cooper, Councillor Peter Cooper, and seconded by Councillor Paul Wienko. Be it resolved that Planning Council amend the agenda to add the 380 Macy Bay Road request by Councillor Cooper regarding the water intake request. So open it up for any discussion. We've already heard the reasons why. And call the question then. All those in favor? It carries. Okay, so now we can add that to the main one. Sorry, normally we don't have to do it this way, but there was contention. And to make an amendment to a motion, you should have an amending resolution first, and then if it passes, you put it on the main motion and go on. But before, anybody that was asking for stuff to go on the agenda, there never seemed to be any contention. So we just added it and everybody went with it. So moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that Council adopts the Planning Council agenda of November 12, 2018 as amended. And the first item is add item 6D, Planning Committee Resolution PC 07-18, which I mentioned earlier. And the second one is the amendment we just voted on, add item 6E, Macy Bay Road water intake. Questions, comments, any other suggestions for amendment?
You did mention the deletion of 6C. Is that to be on there?
You want that on there?
No.
No, it's just deferred. Anything else?
It's 6C, is that correct? I just want to make sure.
6C is deferred. That's the Monet, is it?
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And it carries. Thank you. So this morning there are 3 public meetings scheduled for road closing and 2 shore road closing applications. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated. Next, the clerk will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaw and provide for any other information that is relevant to the application. Although I see our deputy clerk here.
She wasn't going to be, but carry on.
She wasn't going to be? Okay, but she is here. From there, the applicant and members of the public will have an opportunity to speak to the bylaw being considered. Council will then consider the bylaw immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended to deal with the following proposed road closing bylaws. And the first one is 2018-111 for Carpenter. Second, 2018-112 for Shields. And the third is 2018-114 for Craddock.
Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper, and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in the close proximity of the properties at least 20 days prior to today's meeting.
Thank you.
The first application is for 1521 Georgian Bay Shore. It has been requested to be closed as the applicant wishes to own the land. The total area to be sold is 3,285 square meters at a purchase rate of $8 per square meter for the total purchase price of $26,280 plus HST. No public comments were received, and staff have no concerns with this application.
Okay, is the applicant here today? Don't see any hands. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Okay, so bring it into council's hands now. Moved by Councillor Kay, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council pass bylaw 2018-111, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 15212 Georgian Bay Shore. So open it up to council for questions or comments. Councillor Wienko.
Just clarification, there's no structures on this property? It's a vacant piece of land?
For your worship, that's correct. There's no structures.
Councillor Cooper.
Just clarification again, it's the shore road allowance at the top and down the side. I couldn't quite tell from this whether there was a sort of like a road or a notated road, I guess would be the way to describe it. Is this side down this side as well?
Through your worship, so there's the part one is the shore road allowance, and there is a road allowance that runs along the side of it. This time the applicant does not wish to purchase the road allowance.
Okay, so the one to the left side, they're not purchasing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Our second application.
Second application is for 128 Carson Way. The shore road allowance has been requested to be closed as the applicant wishes to construct a boathouse. The total area to be sold is 522.43 square meters at a rate of $8 per square meter. The purchase price is $4,179.44 plus HST. There were no comments received from the public for this application, and there are no staff concerns.
So is the applicant here for this application? No. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Don't be shy. Okay, nothing, so I'll bring it into council's hands. So it's moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that council pass bylaws 2018-112 and 2018-113, being a bylaw to stop up and close the shore road allowance in front of 128 Carson Way, and a deeming bylaw to deem the property no longer on a plan of subdivision. So open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Cooper?
Just for clarification again, I see, just like the last one in this, if you could go back to the showing the lake picture, not the photograph, but that. It shows the road allowance in front of lot number one, I'm having trouble reading this, 34 I think it is. And is that being purchased as well?
Through your worship, that's the neighboring property, different neighbor, so it's not being purchased at this time. They would need to come in separately, submit their application.
But what we're looking at here is showing it go right in front of the neighbor. Is that, so that just sort of...
Just means it's still open?
Right,
Unpurchased?
so the application is for the land in front of 128 only, so not in front of...
Just want to make sure that's the case. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that one carries. Thank you. And our third application?
The third application is for 2 Island 27 River, and it is requested to be closed as the applicant wishes to own the property. There are structures on this property. The total area to be sold is 1,607 square meters for purchase, or at a rate of $6 per square meter, for a purchase price of $9,642 plus HST. The abutting neighbor submitted a letter that they have no concerns with this application, and there were no other public comments received. Staff also have no concerns with this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here today for this application? No. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Don't see any hands, so I'll bring it into council's hands. Moved by Councillor Kay, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council pass bylaws 2018-114 and 2018-115, being a bylaw to stop up and close part of the original road allowance abutting 2 Island 20 Severn River, and a deeming bylaw to deem the property no longer on a plan of subdivision. So I'll open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Wianco.
It looks like a number of structures have been built on this, it's a road right away, including a boathouse. How'd they get away with that?
Through your worship, the boathouse is quite old. I don't recall the date, but it is quite old.
Scary, because basically the boathouse was built on our property, I guess, wasn't it?
There's lots of those in our township. Prior to the 70s, you built what you wanted, where you wanted.
Scary.
Councillor Cooper?
Once again, it's sort of what we're looking at here. I'm looking at the map of the area and having difficulty equating that with what I'm seeing in the picture or in the survey. Can you explain to me what I'm looking at in this particular picture here? That looks like an interior lot. I don't see an island. I'm quite perplexed.
Through your worship, so the map is a little deceiving. This is the water that comes in through here.
Oh.
Actually, I think part of this lot here is flooded, and the road allowance runs under the water, and it starts, the land starts again here. So this is the road allowance that runs abutting this property. There's no shore road allowance, as you can tell in front of any of these lots on this island.
So this is a dead end bay?
I don't believe the water runs down through here to, yes, you can see in this image, the water continues to run south. But I don't believe it's a dead end bay.
So just to follow up, if you don't mind, then, so really what we're looking at here, I mean, I see square shorelines and all sorts of things that don't make any sense, so it's sort of notional. It's not a very good reflection of what we're looking at in the pictures and the survey.
The lot lines within CGIS are not always accurate, so we can't always go by what this
Right, thank you.
this map shows.
This is an island. Yeah. Okay, now. Yeah, this is an island property.
It doesn't quite look like it from
Any other questions, comments? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay. So that closes our first public meeting. So we'll get into item 5A, our next public meeting. It's for a zoning bylaw. This morning there's a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I'll briefly summarize the procedure. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendment being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications. And the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak to the amendments being considered through the mayor. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then consider the bylaws immediately following. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. And that's zoning bylaw 18/30 for GBI Limited. Madam Clerk.
Notice of the public meeting were sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 30 days prior to today's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the property or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendment. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on the application, that any subsequent appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendment must submit a written request to the clerk's office.
Morning, Dana.
Morning.
So you can take it away.
All right, so the property that we are discussing today is 4 Island 840 in Georgian Bay. It is zoned shoreline residential island type 1. It is designated waterfront within the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community. And as you can see, the property is located in black It is about 3 acres in size. This is an aerial view of the subject property. The development is located towards the middle as well as towards the northern point, and you can see the development on the surrounding properties. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the subject lands to designate it in site-specific zoning. The application is proposing an expansion of a legal non-conforming dwelling. The dwelling is non-conforming because there are 2 dwellings on the property. They were both constructed in about 1950. So they are proposing an addition to an existing dwelling with a current gross floor area of 46 square meters, and they're proposing a total of 112 square meters, so an addition of 66 square meters. They are also proposing a reduced setback of 4.1 meters. It's currently 5.9, where 20 meters is required on the northeast side, and a setback of 4.5 meters and 4.1 meters, where 20 meters is required on the west side. An excerpt from Schedule A of our zoning bylaw map, so it would, if the application is approved, it would get a site-specific exception. Just some photos of the subject land. So this is looking towards the property, towards that northern point, and as you can see, the existing vegetation on the lands. And this is a view southeast coming towards the property. And this is the dwelling subject to the application, so they are proposing an addition to this dwelling towards the rear and the side of it. And another view, so this is standing on their dock looking towards the subject dwelling. And this is the location of the proposed addition. So they are proposing the addition to go on the rear here, as well as to the side where this existing deck is. This is a view to the northwest. And this is a view to the northwest looking at the side where that proposed addition will be. As you can see, there is some vegetation that will act as a buffer to prevent any visual impact. And this is a view to the northeast, some of the existing vegetation. And this is a view looking east. The oak tree may have to be removed. It will depend during construction on whether or not. The addition won't go out. It will be a few feet away from the oak tree, but it will depend on if they need room for construction purposes. So this is looking from cottage 2 towards the main cottage. And another view of where that proposed addition will be located towards the back and the side of the property. And this is the other cottage that is currently located on the property. It's about 25 meters from the high water mark and 30 meters on the back side. This cottage is about 78 square meters on each floor. And this is standing at cottage 2, looking towards the dwelling that they're looking to increase in size. And just to give you an idea of what their site plan, so as you can see, the main cottage that they use, they classify as cottage 1, or the southern cottage, is located about 24 meters on this side from the high water mark and about 35 on this side. They do have an existing sleeping cabin as well as some storage sheds. The sheds are about 10 square meters, and the sleeping cabin is 24 square meters. This is the existing dwelling that is subject of the application and the addition that is being proposed. It's 18 square meters of a screened porch and 48 square meters of addition. So the closest setback is 3.7 meters, which is this setback here, and they're proposing 4.1 and 4.5 on this side, as well as 4.1 on the other side, the northeast side. So they are getting slightly closer on the northeast side by 1.8 meters. So the official plan establishes principles and bases for the waterfront area. Honey Harbor aims to protect the character of the area, and an enlargement to a non-conforming use may be permitted, provided 3 things. The zoning will not permit any change of use or performance standard that may negatively impact adjoining uses. The uses do not constitute a danger to surrounding land uses, humans, or animals by virtue of hazardous nature. The uses do not interfere with appropriate development of the surrounding lands. So the proposed addition will not negatively affect adjoining uses or cause a hazard. This is an idea of the floor plan that they are thinking. So as you can see, there is a screened porch with some living spaces and expansion of the existing kitchen. And there is 2 bedrooms and a den. And the elevation. So the height of the existing cottage is 3.5 meters, and the height will be maintained with a more modern look towards it. And another view of the proposed cottage. There has been consultation with the septic installer that installed their original septic to ensure that their proposed addition has capacity. It will also be reviewed by the building department should an application come in. So the intent of the front yard setbacks is to ensure a balance between the natural shoreline and built form is maintained. There are no gross floor area restrictions in Honey Harbor, but there are lot coverage to ensure that a lot is not overdeveloped. They have 3 acres, and they are proposing a lot coverage of 2%. So that's including both dwellings, the addition, the sleeping cabin, and the small storage sheds. So if no oral submissions of objection are raised, or if there's no concerns by council in regards to this application, staff recommend that the bylaw be passed. The bylaw will limit them to allow this addition, but it will not allow any expansion of the other dwelling on the property. Should in the future they want to expand the other dwelling on the property, further planning approval would be needed. I am available for any questions if you have any.
Madam Clerk?
The District of Muskoka does not oppose the approval of the application, provided that site plan control is used to address phosphorus management, including stormwater management, vegetation retention, and replanting. 1 letter of opposition was received from Jean Bachuti and Joan Hansberger, stating concerns with the size of the structure and the decreased setbacks, as well as with impacts to water quality.
Okay. So is the applicant here today?
Sort of, Your Worship. I'm the applicant's architect. One of the applicants who's coming as well, but she's currently waiting for a tow truck on the side of the foreground, so
Yeah.
I'm here anyway.
Did you wish to add anything
Um,
to Dana's explanation?
I could explain why they want to expand the property, if that's of interest to you.
Sure,
or I
come
can
on up
explain
and
it.
turn the microphone on and state your name for the record, please.
Thank you. So my name is Michael Scott, and just by way of a slight bit of background, my client's father owns the property, and so he lives in the main cottage in the center of the island, and my client and his family have this cabin as their summer cottage. So it's a family of 4, 2 adults and their 2 daughters. They currently spend every weekend in the 450 square foot cabin, basically, and it's kind of cramped for a family of 4. And so all they want to do is just add some living space, basically. They're not increasing the number of people who live in the property. There are 4 of them there now, and there will be 4 of them. And so we did our very best to make it as modest as possible, and also to avoid getting any closer to the water line on any side. Unfortunately, as Dana has pointed out, when we got the final survey showing the high water mark, because the property is quite flat on one side, it does end up being a bit closer to the high water mark, although not to the current water line. But that was the best we could achieve because it's on a narrow point that comes out.
Okay, thank you. Hang around, there may be questions. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Don't see any hands going up. You sleeping, Alan? Or? No, not yet. Okay. Okay. I'll read the resolution, and council can ask their questions. So it's moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay, and it is a 2-part resolution. Be it resolved that council directs staff to consider the public comments received for zoning bylaw 18/30 for 4 Island 840 Georgian Bay, and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration, or be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2018-110, being a zoning bylaw amendment, ZBL 18/30 for 4 Island 840 Georgian Bay. So open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Cooper.
I have a few questions and comments. Firstly, the survey is pretty hard to read. And so it looks like it was done 100 years ago, but clearly from comments it sounds like it wasn't. Can you explain to me when was the survey done?
Dana?
Through you, Mayor Braid, I believe it was done 2017 or 2018. It is fairly recent. The plans that you see here are done by the architect, but they did have the addition shown on a survey. This plan was just a little bit easier to read on the screen. Let me just find the date on the survey for you. Sorry, the copy of the survey isn't very clear. Do you know when it was?
Well, it was commissioned for this project. I think we had it done in May.
Of this year?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's question one. And this is located on South Bay, Honey Harbor, it says here on the survey. I can read that part, which is, I understand, is a very sensitive area in coastal Georgian Bay. At risk for algae blooms, shallow waters, etc. So we have to be exceedingly careful of this area. That's another comment. It appears there are two proposed main dwellings and 1 sleeping cabin on this building, plus some sheds, and it's about 3 acres. Is sort of what I get from this picture. And so one of the rules of planning that I like to think about is if it can comply, it should comply. And another alternative could have been here, that this could remain as a sleeping cabin and another structure could have been put further back, further onto the property so it was compliant. And I'm asking, was that given any consideration? And if not, why not?
I mean, from my perspective, I guess the really simple answer is that they didn't ask me to consider that possibility. But, I mean, it's not a sleeping cabin, it's an existing cottage. It has a kitchen and stuff in it. Obviously, the cost of building a completely new structure would be considerably higher, at least potentially. And it's also, I mean, that would result in greater lot coverage and more built development on the property.
Thank you, and I just, once again, even if it is treated as a cottage, it could become a sleeping cabin, I guess is what I was sort of referencing, and a structure could be built, probably for not a lot more money, in a location that was really much more compliant, and I just sort of err on the side of caution, not only because it's in South Bay, but because if it can comply, it should comply. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kay?
Looking at this sketch, where is the septic?
The septic system is, do you see where the sleeping cabin is marked on the left side? The septic is between that and the main cottage, and it's fairly new.
Yeah, that's what you said, Dean said. Okay. The other thing, I thought reading the report, it said that the main cottage was unfinished still?
Through you, Mayor Braid, I believe they are working on, the second story is finished, and I believe they're currently renovating interior on the main floor of the other cottage.
So is it a relatively new build then?
Through you, Mayor Braid, no, it was built, I believe, in the 1950s.
Okay, so they're just renovating it. Okay,
Just some upkeeping.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Supplemental question on the septic. I did forget to ask about that. So there's one septic system for two cottages, supposed cottages, is that correct?
Through your Mayor Braid, that is correct.
And we don't require two septic systems? I mean, I don't even know that we generally, this is grandfathered, I realize, but generally, you're only allowed to have one main dwelling on a property. This is two, so our bylaws allow for two main dwellings to feed one septic system?
Through you, Mayor Braid, my understanding is if they comply with the Ontario Building Code, then
I'm talking about our bylaws.
our bylaw, we allow a septic that will service whatever you have on your property. It will be through the building code.
Any other questions? Dana, you mentioned an oak tree. Is that the one in figure 9? That might have to come down?
Through you, Mayor Braid, figure 8. It may have to come down. They won't know until they start construction. It will
Okay,
depend where the
'cause
roots are. But there's still vegetation that will buffer it.
So I'm trying to figure out whether figure 8 and figure 9 are two different trees, or
Oh,
if you go to figure 9, is the tree that might have to come down on the left or in the center, to the right sort of thing? That one there? Okay.
yes, the tree on the left.
I think they may want to look
Okay.
at that other one. See the big split in it? If that's an oak tree, my experience is it's rotten inside. So you may want to have a real close look at that one before it falls down. Yeah, well, in some of these storms, be surprised what's come down. So any other questions, or Councillor Ranko?
Yeah, no, I got a problem with this because we are really condoning two cottages on one property. And having two full-size cottages on one property, I really have a problem with, especially since it's so close to the water. I don't think I can support this. I'm sorry.
And what was the lot coverage? 2% or something?
That is correct.
And if this were allowed, that locks them in to what they have, and any other changes, they would have to come back and ask council again.
Through you,
Or
Mayor
another.
Braid, it locks them in for the gross floor area for each dwelling if they are building another complying structure, unless you wanted to alternate the bylaw to restrict them to only the development that they have and what they're proposing. And
is there enough property and shoreline that they could subdivide into 2 lots on this? I know you might have to do some calculations, but
And we would have to calculate that.
if you're talking 3 acres. Councillor Cooper?
We have an answer on that one, I believe. There was an attempt to subdivide Powell Island in the north part of Honey Harbor a few years ago. That was not approved by the impact. I'm sorry, it was not approved. It was taken and defeated. And it was 4 acres with 2 main, what were considered to be main structures. But apparently the bylaws that have been in place for, I think, since 1991, which is, in order to sever, you need 2.5 acres anywhere on coastal Georgian Bay. So we have that answer already. Thank you.
So Dana, another question. If the proposal changed to add on to the main dwelling in the center that appears to have the proper setbacks, is that a zoning amendment, or is that something that they can do without coming to council?
Through you, Mayor Braid, that would also be a zoning amendment. So any addition to either of the dwellings requires a zoning amendment because they're legal non-conforming.
So council, do you want to deal with this today, or do you want to send it back to staff to bring a report back next meeting, or January, for the new council to deal with?
I'll deal with it today. Say, I could probably support an addition to the other cottage, but this being so close to the water, and all they're getting is a living room and a dining room out of this whole thing. It's not like they're getting any more sleeping quarters and so on, so this is a nice to have, but it's not an essential. And I think this really are condoning 2 cottages on one property, which is something that we shouldn't be condoning anyway.
So Dana, is there room for the applicant to amend this application? I have a funny feeling it's going south at this point, so. As is. Jamie?
Just in terms of comments, what I would recommend is that council to me really has 3 options. Approve, defer, so that the applicant and staff can come back and review the comments that have been provided today by council and from the residents, and review the proposal and either modify as required or prepare a subsequent recommendation report. If council were going to deny the application, given the new LPAT rules, they should not do that today. They would have to provide this back to staff, have another planner prepare a staff, like I can't recall, was there a recommendation in this report, Nick, or is it just an info report?
Just an info report.
Okay, so if they're gonna deny it, you wouldn't deny it today. That gets done at a subsequent meeting, but you're really deferring this back to, I guess, so then your only real option is defer this back to staff to consider the comments.
Is that okay?
Yeah, just as another comment, I would support maybe the addition of a screened-in porch if they wanted some more living accommodations, but this idea of a dining room and a living room addition, I'm going to have problems even if it comes back, so I would support a screened-in porch, but no other accommodations.
Kathy, you okay with sending this back to staff?
Yeah.
Okay. And go ahead.
Just if I could say this, that, I mean, there's a lot of different options that one could consider here, and one that I see works sometimes very well with larger family groupings is to maybe take this space and use it as common area that's existing. In other words, make that your living room and dining room, and in the more compliant area, put a 600 square foot sleeping cabin, which could well accommodate this family. So that might be a solution. I know it's not all in one building, but given the setbacks and the other issues that are here, that might be a solution. So I just throw that out for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got all these comments down, or we can watch the video after. So I'll cross off the last part. So the resolution will read, moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay, be it resolved that council directs staff to consider the public comments received for zoning bylaw 18/30 for 4 Island 840 Georgian Bay, and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration. And since there were no public comments, that will be called council comments.
There was public comments on this topic, came in today.
Oral. Yeah, it was in the script.
Oh, okay. Forgot about that. Anyways, council comments also. So. Any more discussion? Call a question then. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. So you got your work cut out for you. closes all our public meetings. Anybody need a break at this point, or can we move on? Move on. The next item has to deal with the boat club. Moved by Councillor Kay, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the attached site plan amendment agreement as a condition of development under bylaw 97-3 by passing bylaw 2018-116, which adds Schedule B to the existing site plan control agreement for 2709 Honey Harbor Road, which is the Honey Harbor Boat Club. So, Nick, you want to give us Cole's notes on this one?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is the Honey Harbor Boat Club, and it's an application to amend a commercial site plan agreement. It all relates to a dwelling that exists on the property, which is in this location, and a proposed expansion to the west, which is this little rectangle here with a small porch on the front, a deck, sorry, on the front. The lands are zoned marine commercial, and the marine commercial zone does allow an accessory single-family dwelling on the property. It allows one, so this is the one dwelling that's allowed. The proposal, as I mentioned, is to expand away from the property boundary being here to the east. And there's no concerns from staff as it complies with the zoning bylaw in terms of setbacks, height, gross floor area, and all those requirements. So we have no objection to this amendment to the site plan agreement, subject to any council questions you may have.
So open it up to council for questions. Councillor Rianco?
Yeah, just clarification. So this is some kind of a house or cottage on this property, and they want to add on a porch to the back? Is that what you're talking about?
No, they actually want to expand on the dwelling in this rectangle and have a deck in the front, this smaller rectangle.
Oh, okay, so it's actually an extension to the cottage.
Correct.
Councillor Cooper?
I'm trying to sort of understand the actual survey. And so this building is relatively close to the waterfront side of the lot as opposed to the road, Honey Harbor Road side of the lot. Is that correct?
Yes, through your worship, Honey Harbor Road is down here,
Okay.
and the shoreline is up here with the docking facility in front.
So then my other question is, I know that there were dwellings up at the top, in other words, near the Honey Harbor Road, and I'm seeing some buildings, including one that says frame building, which I know was a house at one point. Is it still there, and is it still being used as a house? Can you explain that to me?
My understanding through discussions with the landowner is that there's only one dwelling on the property.
Well, it says frame building. Do you see that one?
Yep.
And you've inspected that building? You know what it is?
I have not visited the site, other than when I've been there to meet clients to take us on a boat.
So, I just happen to know that there are a couple of, that was a house, and if it's something else now, perhaps, but I'm just saying, I think there probably are two dwellings on the property. The other question I had, so that's for your edification, I guess, or maybe. The other thing is to the Delawana side of this lot. It's showing. So does the so does the boat club road run over Delawana land?
I'm not sure, but this, I believe, is the main entrance into the boat club, and the road, I think, is in this location down here.
Yes.
It looks like it crosses onto an adjacent piece of land and then comes back onto the land.
So the road is effectively, it doesn't look like they own, or maybe they do. I mean, it says part 3, part 6, part whatever, so maybe they own that land too. I don't know. I'm just a bit surprised about that road, but it's not unusual, I guess, in some of these older communities to have roads run over other people's property.
And
So
when there's parts on a reference plan, it's very likely that it could be a right-of-way that's established, so they may have the right-of-way to cross Delawana lands whenever there's a part on the registered plan.
And this structure that's here is in effect, I would assume, it's not a rental property per se, it's a property for the general manager, not the property, a building, the house, the dwelling is for the general manager of the boat club, is that correct?
That is my understanding based upon discussions with the applicant.
Okay. So my only, I guess, comment to everybody is that I think there are two dwellings, and not that I really have a huge issue with that, but I think we need to be mindful of that. That's all I'm suggesting. Thank you.
So just to understand, Nick, this is just dealing with this one cottage. They already have an existing site plan agreement, and we're amending it.
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? So call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. We're at item 6B. Resolutions moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that council directs staff to refund the application fee to lift a holding provision, $575, to Teresa Roy at 277 Go Home River Shore. And Nick, this was your report, just Cole's notes.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. You may recall Teresa Roy made an application to remove a hold zone relatively recently, and that was all related to a former landfill that was in the area. And the District of Muskoka had provided information that the subject property was within the zone of influence of the former landfill area. However, when the district did further studies, they determined that the property was no longer within that zone of influence area. And so we removed the hold from the property. So basically the Roys were benefiting from new information from the District of Muskoka, and we advised Mrs. Roy that she had two options. She could either wait till we did a housekeeping amendment to reflect the new zone boundary, the new influence boundaries, or she could make an application for the site-specific lifting, which she chose to do. So staff were of the opinion that because the lift of the hold was related to new information from the District of Muskoka, that the money should be refunded to Mrs. Roy, because we would have otherwise have done it through a housekeeping amendment anyway. She just wanted it done in advance because she's looking to sell the property.
When would this housekeeping amendment come?
It would probably be middle of next year before we do another one.
And is she okay with that, or?
No, she's applied to lift the hold, which we've done already. So she's gone ahead and done it on her own. We gave her two options. We said she could either wait for the housekeeping or move in advance of the housekeeping, which is what she did. So we've already lifted the hold zone. She's just looking to get her money back now.
And you're recommending we do that?
Yes, because it's information related to the District of Muskoka providing some new information.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Call a question. All those in favor? That carries. is the Moneg, which is deferred. So after that is in addition, the Planning Committee resolution. And so moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that Council adopt Planning Committee Resolution PC-07-18 dated November 2nd, 2018. And who wants to speak to that? Paul?
I think we met on November the 2nd with the full planning committee here, and Councillor Cooper and Councillor Bocek was there, at least Ryan was there part of the day. We had a very, very productive meeting and got a lot done. I think we spent most of the morning talking about a couple of the issues, which is 4.1.14 and 15. In the afternoon, we made a bunch of other additions, but not everything got approved. In some cases, we wanted more information, and you can read the resolution that we passed indicating that we did need more information. This information will either come back to council in the new year, probably January, or if we decide to continue the planning committee into the new term, those comments and discussions will come back to the planning committee. So I think the resolution on November the 2nd was unanimous with all the members of the planning committee.
So, Nick, does this stuff go back to you? The resolution is basically that we're adopting all these recommendations, but
Yeah, so what we've done is we've been working with Jamie on the housekeeping bylaws. So Jamie's been leading the discussions regarding the planning committee. And so any further study would be done by Jamie and his staff, as well as our staff. So we collaborate on providing answers to any questions we're asked to investigate.
If I could just add, so what would happen to implement these items that have been agreed upon is we come back with the bylaw to council that specifically references these items, and then ask council to enact that housekeeping amendment to implement what's been specifically agreed to here, just like we did the last time, just that bylaw wasn't prepared in sufficient time for the meeting. So, so that's how this resolution would be given effect by a new bylaw coming back to council. As far as public process, all the items that were recommended to proceed based on the discussions at the planning committee, those were all items that were subject to the previous public meetings on the housekeeping amendments in May and June. So one of the components of the bylaw that comes back to council will be whether or not council considers or determines whether or not additional public consultation is required on those matters. It'll be staff's suggestion that it's not. There's been no new information provided. It's just that planning committee has recommended that they be brought forward. So you will get a bylaw at a subsequent, or new council will get a bylaw at a subsequent council meeting that gives effect to this resolution.
okay. I'm just a little uncomfortable with the resolution to adopt all these recommendations, because these are two different pieces of paper that are going to be in different places. on the website. I would sooner add on to this that, that staff come back in the future with a proposed housekeeping bylaw. All right?
Yeah, I'd suggest that.
I know it's all throughout the planning resolution, but guess what? It's over here in the planning part of our website, and this is going to be on the council part of it, so.
Yeah, I'd suggest that you don't need a resolution today, that we bring a bylaw forward at a subsequent council meeting, and that council speak by bylaw in order to give effect to this resolution at a subsequent.
But we need a resolution to accept this.
That's fine.
I'm just saying that we should add to this, and that staff will bring back a housekeeping bylaw in the future.
Sure. It's fine.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
I would just like to comment that the last item, fish habitat, and the discussion we had around PSW, as I recall anyway, was that we were going to consult with MNRF. Anything like that is a change in provincial policy, we need not only consultation with MNRF, but I think that was the intent, but also I'm thinking that this is so profound that I think there might need to be another public meeting. It's pretty important stuff. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Can we leave that with staff to determine, make a recommendation back to the new council?
Yeah, if any changes are made with respect to PSW and the mapping, there will definitely be public consultation on those matters. So I was speaking more towards the first few items, but definitely on the fish habitat PSW, there would be consultation.
It'd be a very good way to fill the room. Thank you.
Speaking of fish habitat, we were doing a remapping or looking at it, or where are we at with that little project? Nick?
Yeah, the fish habitat mapping?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're consulting right now with MNRF and the Severn Sound Environmental Association, just to make sure that what the consultant has done meets MNRF standards, as well as the SSEA. So we're still at that stage. We do have new mapping though, but it just hasn't been confirmed yet.
Okay. Are there significant changes, or?
There are some significant changes, yes, in the mapping.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so the resolution now reads, it's moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that Council adopt Planning Committee Resolution PC-07-18 dated November 2nd, 2018, and that staff bring back housekeeping bylaws including the approved changes. Any further? Paul?
And just to clarify, Jamie, that resolution coming back to us will indicate that the further reviews that we talk about here will be approved to go ahead with those reviews? Or is that automatically done through this resolution? Do we need council approval to go ahead with those reviews?
I think those additional reviews would be facilitated through this resolution.
Okay. Okay, so basically you're only looking for approval, I think on the first three, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, for the housekeeping.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, 14 to 15. Okay.
It's just... Okay? Everybody okay? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries. Thanks, Paul, for, and I guess Councillor Cooper's part of this committee too, and Councillor Bochek.
Yeah, it's working quite well. It did work quite well. I was very impressed.
And I assume you're going to reconstitute it next month?
That's my recommendation, but it's up to council.
You can put the motion forward and they can vote on it. But you need it at the table.
I think we'll be look forward on all the committees at some point.
Okay, and the final item, moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Bianco. Be it resolved that Planning Council request an extension from the MOECC for submitting comments regarding the 380 Macy Bay Road water intake application, and that Azimuth submit comments on behalf of the township if an extension is not granted. Do you want them to comment anyways, whether it's granted or not? Okay, so let's cross off part of that. Councillor Bianco?
I just want to know from staff, how long would it take to prepare a letter to the MOE? Are we talking an hour or so, or a whole day, or what, you know, what's involved in preparing a request for an extension? I don't want to spend a lot of time on that.
Through your worship, I don't know the exact amount of time. I talked to Mr. Jones on Friday, and he said he could have something prepared by whatever the deadline was. And it didn't seem to me like it was an arduous task to complete that. So I would think hours as opposed to days.
I don't want to waste a lot of time on it, but I don't want to get that through.
Okay, so any other discussion on this resolution? Councillor Kay?
I can go for half of it, so I'm either gonna have to decline it or we separate it.
Which half are you going for?
Asthma recommendation from the hydrologist.
I think we've already gotten the word that MOECC won't extend it, but does it hurt to ask again?
Not to waste
You know,
someone's time.
through a resolution?
Just an hour or two.
Okay.
You all
Through
right
your
with that?
worship, I don't think the extension request would take very long. It's a matter of a sentence in an email or a sentence in the letter that's provided to them. But
Provide them a copy of this. Okay? Anything else? Call the question then. All those in favor? And it carries. Okay, so two more. Moved by Councillor Kay, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2018-117, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the November 12, 2018 Planning Council meeting. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Carries. And moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Kay. Be it resolved that Planning Council does now adjourn at 10:23 a.m. until Monday, December 10th, 2018 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, folks. Let's take a 12-minute reconvene at 25 to 11 for regular council.